I've had the same dream 3 nights in a row now. I'm standing at the edge of Devil's Backbone Lookout, that jagged ridge that cuts through Mark Twain National Forest like a prehistoric spine. It's twilight, but not the normal kind. The sky bleeds a deep, bruised purple, and the moon hangs bloated and yellow, too close to the horizon. In the dream, I'm scanning the tree line below with my binoculars when I spot movement. Not the usual deer, or even the occasional black bear. This is something else. Tall and gaunt, moving with a halting gait between the old-growth oaks. Before I can focus properly, a hand clamps down on my shoulder, cold and bony, fingers too long to be human. "Don't look directly at them, Ranger Ellis," a voice whispers in my ear, dry as autumn leaves. First rule of Tom Sock, eyes forward after sunset. That's when I wake up, sheets soaked with sweat, the smell of pine and decay lingering in my nostrils. Hello, viewers. If you wish your stories or experiences to be narrated by me, share them on our own subreddit, which you can join from the description below. I will pick the stories from the community and narrate them, and every once in a while, we will host a 3-hour story compilation. My name is Michael Ellis. 3 weeks ago, I accepted a transfer to the Missouri Ozarks Division of the National Park Service. Specifically, I'm now stationed at Tom Sock Mountain State Park, overseeing the highest point in Missouri and several miles of the surrounding wilderness. The transfer wasn't entirely my choice. After the incident at Yellowstone, the one that left me with a permanent limp and a department-mandated psychological evaluation, my options were limited, except a quieter post or hand in my badge. I chose the former. After 12 years as a ranger, I wasn't ready to give up the only life I've ever wanted. I grew up in Springfield, just a couple hours' drive from here, so the Ozarks aren't entirely foreign territory. As a kid, my dad would take me camping at Lake of the Ozarks State Park, teaching me how to fish for bass and crappie in the murky waters. But Tom Sock is different, more remote, more rugged. The nearest town, Ironton, is a 30-minute drive on winding mountain roads, population barely over 1,000. My cabin sits at the edge of the ranger station complex, a modest one-bedroom with knotty pine walls and a porch that faces the dense woods. On clear days, I can see the Ozark Trail winding its way through the valley below. The main station houses our small team. Myself, Senior Ranger Caroline Hayward, who runs the place, the perpetually cheerful intern Ethan Murphy, and grizzled maintenance manager Dave Winters, who's been working these woods since before I was born. My first 2 weeks were routine: trail maintenance, visitor assistance, wildlife monitoring. Nothing unusual beyond the occasional lost hiker or campfire violation. The locals seemed friendly enough, if a bit reserved. Mrs. Greeley at the Ironton General Store always throws in an extra coffee when I stop by for supplies. Sheriff Downey tipped his hat when we crossed paths at the Abbey Kitchen, the only decent restaurant for miles. It wasn't until my 3rd week that things began to change. First came the dreams, then the sealed envelope Caroline handed me yesterday, her expression carefully neutral. "Special protocols for Tom Sock Division," she said, sliding the manila envelope across her desk. "Local amendments to the Standard Ranger Handbook. Memorize them, then burn the document." I laughed, thinking it was some kind of hazing ritual for the new guy. Caroline didn't smile back. "I'm serious, Michael. These aren't optional guidelines. They're survival rules." I took the envelope, still half convinced it was an elaborate joke. "The trails change at night," she added as I reached the door, "and not just on the maps." Now, sitting on my porch with a lukewarm cup of coffee, I stare at the unopened envelope on my lap. The sun is setting behind the ridge, painting the sky that same bruised purple from my dreams. In the distance, Something howls. Not quite wolf, not quite human. I break the seal and begin to read. The pages inside the envelope were typed on official Park Service letterhead, but the header had been blacked out with marker. 3 water stains marked the corners, giving the paper a weathered look, like it had been passed from ranger to ranger for years. Tom Sauk Division, Supplemental Guidelines Classified. Ranger Eyes Only. I scanned the first page, my coffee growing cold beside me. The document started normally enough. Special procedures for extreme weather conditions, local wildlife cataloging protocols, terrain-specific emergency response guidelines. Standard stuff, though oddly detailed for a relatively small park. Then I turned to page 3, and my blood chilled. Night Protocol. Supplemental Rules. The following regulations supersede standard operating procedures during nightfall hours, defined as 30 minutes after sunset until 30 minutes before sunrise, within Tom Sauk Division boundaries, no exceptions. Rule 1. Never shine your flashlight directly at the tree line for more than 5 seconds. If you must illuminate the forest edge, use wide beam mode only and keep the light moving. Rule 2. If you hear your name called from the woods, do not respond verbally. Tap your radio twice against a hard surface as acknowledgement, then proceed in the opposite direction. Rule 3. Hikers reported after sunset are to be logged as pending sunrise verification. Do not initiate search procedures until daylight, regardless of reported emergency. Direct all after-hours calls to Sheriff Downey's office. Rule 4. The Minasoc Falls Trail is closed to Ranger Patrol between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. If maintenance is required during these hours, minimum team of 3 rangers required with continuous radio contact. Rule 5. If you encounter a deer with unusual markings, see Appendix B, do not approach. Report location to Senior Ranger immediately and leave area. Rule 6. Should you discover rock formations arranged in circles within your patrol area, do not disturb them. Log location and avoid that section of trail for 3 days. Rule 7. In the event of radio static lasting more than 10 seconds, change channels immediately. If static persists across all channels, return to station by the most direct route available. Do not stop for any reason. I flipped to the appendices, finding detailed sketches of what constituted unusual markings on deer. Patterns that looked more like ritualistic scarring than natural coloration. Another page showed examples of the rock formations to avoid, arranged in perfect circles with strange symbols scratched into key stones. The last page contained a handwritten addition. Rule 8. If you see lights on Devil's Backbone after midnight, do not investigate. Record the pattern, number of lights, color, duration, and report to Senior Ranger Hayward only. The signature line at the bottom read simply, "Compliance ensures continuation of service." I set the papers down, my hands trembling slightly. This had to be an elaborate prank, a hazing ritual for the new ranger. But something about Caroline's expression when she handed me the envelope suggested otherwise. My phone buzzed, startling me. A text from Ethan, the intern. "First night patrol tomorrow. Hayward assigned you to shadow me. Meet at station 5 p.m. Before I could respond, a second message appeared. "Did you read the packet?" I texted back, "Just finished." Is this some kind of joke? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally. I thought so too at first. It's not. Get some sleep, Ellis. Sleep was the last thing on my mind. I stepped off my porch, the night air crisp with early autumn. The forest stretched before me, a wall of darkness punctuated by the distant hooting of an owl. Out of pure instinct, I raised my flashlight to scan the tree line, then hesitated, remembering Rule 1. Ridiculous, yet I found myself switching to wide beam and sweeping the light in an arc rather than holding it steady. Something moved at the edge of the light's reach. Something tall. I froze, straining to see. The shape seemed to shift, elongating, then contracting, as if struggling to maintain form. Then it stepped forward, a deer, ordinary except for the way it stared directly at me, unblinking. It pawed at the ground 3 times in succession, an oddly deliberate motion. Then it turned and melted into the darkness. I hurried back inside, locked the door, and drew the curtains. As I was heading to the bedroom, my gaze fell on the coffee table where I'd left the protocol papers. They were gone. In their place was a small, smooth stone, still warm to the touch, with a crude symbol etched into its surface, a vertical line with 3 horizontal slashes through it. The same marking I'd seen in the appendix, identified as the one to be most urgently reported. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Instead, I sat by the window, watching the tree line until dawn, the strange stone clutched in my palm. When first light finally broke, I looked down and opened my hand. The stone was now ordinary, unmarked granite. And somehow, that was worse. I spent the day in a fog, jumping at small sounds and second-guessing my memory of the previous night. Had I really seen that deer with its unnatural stare? Had the stone actually changed, or had I simply misremembered its appearance in my sleep-deprived state? When I arrived at the station at 4:45 p.m., Caroline was organizing trail maps at the front desk. She looked up, studying my face. "Rough night?" she asked, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp. "Just getting used to the new place," I replied, not meeting her gaze. "Dreams." She nodded. "That happens to everyone their first few weeks. It'll pass." I wanted to ask about the rules, about the missing document, about the stone, but something held me back. Instead, I asked, "Any special instructions for the patrol tonight?" Caroline slid a map across the counter. "Just standard sweep of Talmsock Trail and the southern entrance to Devil's Backbone. Ethan knows the route." She paused, then added, "Stay on the marked paths. Reception gets spotty in the low valleys." Before I could respond, the door swung open and Ethan bounded in, all gangly limbs and eager energy. At 22, he was a decade younger than me, a wildlife management major at Missouri State getting his field hours. "Ready for some night action, Ellis?" He grinned, adjusting his Park Service cap over his shaggy blonde hair. "As I'll ever be," I replied, trying to match his enthusiasm. Caroline handed Ethan a radio. "Channel 3 tonight. Check in every hour on the hour. Last check at 11 p.m., then head back." Ethan clipped the radio to his belt. "Yes, ma'am. Standard protocol." She fixed him with a pointed look. "All protocols." Something unspoken passed between them, and Ethan's smile dimmed slightly. "Copy that." We loaded our gear into one of the park's green jeeps. Flashlights, first aid kit, water, trail markers. I noticed Ethan slip something else into his pack, a small cloth bag that clinked with the sound of stones or metal. "What's that?" I asked. "Local tradition," he said vaguely. "Good luck charm. You'll get your own soon enough." We set out as the sun began its descent behind the ridge, painting the sky in fiery oranges and reds. The drive to the trailhead took 20 minutes on rough service roads, the jeep bouncing over ruts and rocks. Ethan kept up a steady stream of chatter about the park's history, the tourists' common questions, the best places to spot wildlife. "Talmsock comes from a Native American chief," he explained as we parked near the trailhead. "Local legend says he fell in love with a rival tribe's daughter, Mina. When they couldn't be together, she threw herself off what's now Minasock Falls." "Romantic," I commented. "There's more to it," Ethan said, suddenly serious. "The tribes here believed the Ozarks were thin places, where the barrier between worlds wasn't so solid. Their stories talk about creatures that could slip through those cracks, taking different shapes. Like Wendigos? I asked, recalling old tales from my Boy Scout days. Ethan's head snapped toward me, eyes widening slightly. Where'd you hear that term? I shrugged. Old campfire stories. Creatures that were once human, but became something else through cannibalism or dark magic. Native American folklore. Right, he said, relaxing slightly. Just stories. He checked his watch. Sun's almost down. Let's get moving. Stay close, especially after dark. We set off down the trail, boots crunching on the gravel path. The forest around us grew denser as we moved away from the parking area, ancient oaks and hickories creating a canopy overhead. Wildlife rustled in the underbrush, normal sounds of squirrels and birds settling in for the night. As darkness fell, I noticed Ethan's demeanor change. The talkative, carefree intern became vigilant, his eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. He checked his watch frequently, and precisely at 6 o'clock, he radioed in our position to Caroline. "You seem tense," I observed after he clipped the radio back to his belt. "Just professional," he replied. "Night patrol is different." Then, almost as an afterthought, "You read the supplemental guidelines, right?" "I did," I said carefully. Then they disappeared. Ethan stopped walking and turned to face me. "What do you mean, disappeared?" I told him about the stone that had replaced the document, how it had been marked and then unmarked by morning. He swore under his breath. "That's not good. Not good at all." He rubbed the back of his neck. "They're acknowledging you." "They? Who's they? Not who. What?" Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a similar stone to the one I'd found, but his was permanently marked with the same 3/ symbol. "This is a warding stone. Local tradition. Caroline should have given you one. She gave me the rules." "Rules aren't enough," he muttered, resuming our walk at a brisker pace. "You need protection." We hiked in silence for the next mile, the beam of our flashlights bouncing along the trail ahead. I noticed Ethan was careful to keep his light moving, never lingering on the tree line. I found myself doing the same. At 7:45 p.m., we reached a fork in the trail. The left path continued along the main Town Sock Trail. The right led toward Devil's Backbone Ridge. "We'll take the Backbone Trail for a mile, then loop back," Ethan said, checking his map. "Should put us on schedule for—" He stopped mid-sentence, head tilting. I listened to and heard it. A faint melody drifting through the trees. It sounded like humming, but with an odd, discordant quality that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Is that—" I began. "Shh," Ethan hissed, switching off his flashlight. I followed suit. In the sudden darkness, my eyes struggled to adjust. The humming grew louder, now accompanied by what sounded like footsteps on dry leaves, a shambling, irregular gait. Ethan gripped my arm, his fingers digging in painfully. "Don't move," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Don't speak. It's crossing the trail ahead." I strained to see in the gloom. A shape moved between the trees about 30 yards ahead, tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. It paused at the edge of the trail, swaying slightly. The humming stopped. The night went silent. No insects, no wind in the trees, nothing. Then, in the stillness, I heard my name. "Michael?" The voice was familiar, yet wrong, like someone trying to speak with a mouth not made for human words. "Michael Ellis?" My heart hammered against my ribs. Rule 2. If you hear your name called from the woods, do not respond verbally. Beside me, Ethan slowly raised his radio and tapped it twice against his belt buckle. The figure's head snapped in our direction with an audible crack. Even in the darkness, I could feel its gaze fix on us. Hungry, curious, alien. It took a step toward us, then another. With each movement, its shape seemed to change subtly, as if it couldn't quite decide what form to take. Ethan's free hand slipped into his pocket and emerged clutching his marked stone. He held it out before him like a shield. The creature stopped. A sound escaped it, not quite a hiss, not quite a laugh. Then it turned and moved back into the forest, its outline dissolving into the darkness, until I couldn't tell where it ended, and the night began. We stood frozen for what felt like an eternity before Ethan finally spoke. "That," he whispered, "was your first Wendigo, and it knows your name." He switched his flashlight back on, hand trembling slightly. "We need to get back to the station, now." "But the patrol is over," he said firmly. "When one of them calls you by name, you don't stay out." That's not in the written rules, but it should be. As we hurried back down the trail, Ethan radioed Caroline with a coded message. "Lookout compromised, voice verification negative, returning to base." Her response was immediate. "Confirmed. Direct route. Lights authorized." I wanted answers, but Ethan shook his head. "Not here. Not now." We practically ran back to the Jeep, our flashlights bobbing wildly despite Rule 1. Some fears supersede others. Only when we were inside with the engine running did Ethan speak again. They usually don't approach like that. Not so boldly. He looked at me with newfound suspicion. "It recognized you, specifically. Why would it know your name already?" I thought of my dreams, of the voice that had whispered in my ear at Devil's Backbone Lookout. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I really don't know." But even as I spoke, a terrible certainty was forming in my gut. Whatever walked these woods at night had been waiting for me. Caroline was waiting for us when we pulled up to the ranger station, her silhouette rigid against the porch light. Her usual composed demeanor had given way to something tenser, more vigilant. She ushered us inside without a word, locking the door behind us. The station's main room had been transformed. Maps were spread across the central table, marked with strange symbols in red ink. Thick salt lines had been poured along the windowsills, and bundles of dried herbs hung above each doorway. Dave Winters sat in the corner, his weathered hands methodically carving symbols into small stones, identical to the one Ethan carried. He glanced up as we entered, eyes narrowing when they landed on me. "It called him by name," Ethan said, without preamble. Caroline's face went a shade paler. "Sit down, Ellis. We need to talk." I sank into a chair, suddenly aware of how badly my legs were shaking. What the hell was that thing out there? And don't tell me it was just a deer or a hiker playing pranks. Dave snorted. "Boys, seen one now. No point sugarcoating it." Caroline shot him a look before turning back to me. "What do you know about the indigenous history of the Ozarks?" "Not much," I admitted. "Osage territory, some Cherokee after the Trail of Tears. The usual broad strokes they teach you in Missouri schools." She nodded. "The Ozarks have been inhabited for over 12,000 years. The Osage called this region U-Tseta, the land in the middle. They believed it existed at the intersection of worlds." "Thin places," I said, recalling Ethan's words from earlier. "Yes." Caroline pulled up a chair across from me. "Every culture has stories about doors between worlds, places where the membrane separating us from other things wears thin. The Osage had strict protocols for these areas, rituals to keep the balance. And let me guess," I said, "Tom Sock is one of these thin places." Dave laughed, a harsh bark with no humor in it. "Boy, Tom Sock ain't just a thin place. It's the thinnest in the whole damn region, like tissue paper compared to brick walls elsewhere." Caroline continued. "When European settlers arrived, They disrupted the Osage practices, broke taboos they didn't understand. Things slipped through. "Wendigos," I said. The room went silent. Even the usual creaks of the old building seemed to pause. "That term's not quite right," Caroline finally said. "The Wendigo is specific to Algonquian tribes further north. What we have here is similar but different. The Osage called them Nan-tse-ai, the Hollow Walkers, entities that can wear shapes like clothes, but are essentially empty. They feed on fear, isolation, desperation," Dave added, testing the edge of his knife against his thumb. "And they're hungry all the time." My mind flashed to the thing on the trail, how its form had seemed to shift and change. And the rules? The protocols? Caroline opened a drawer and pulled out a leather-bound journal, its spine cracked with age. "Over the years, we've learned what works, how to coexist without provoking them. The rules aren't arbitrary, Michael. They're survival tactics, developed through trial and error." Her voice dropped. "Mostly error." She pushed the journal toward me. This belonged to the first official ranger stationed at Tamsok in 1955, Stanley Blackwood. He started with a staff of 6. By the end of his first year, he was alone. I opened the journal with trembling fingers. The early entries were standard ranger logs, weather patterns, wildlife sightings, maintenance tasks. Then, 3 months in, the tone changed. June 17th, 1955. Jenkins missing. Second night patrol. Heard screaming from Minasak Falls area, but couldn't locate source. Found his hat on trail. Strange markings cut into the brim. June 23rd, 1955. Miller and Thompson went looking for Jenkins despite my orders. Neither returned. Found what might be Thompson's boot near Devil's Backbone. Something had gnawed on it. I flipped through more pages, each entry growing more frantic, more detailed about the encounters. Blackwood had begun cataloging rules, observations, methods of deterrence. August 5th, 1955. The old Osage woman from Ironton visited today. Showed me how to make the warding stones. Says they won't stop the hollow ones, but they'll make us less interesting to them. Worth trying. Nothing else has worked. September 30th, 1955. Found rock circles on the East Ridge again. Disturbed one last week, and that night something tried to get into the station. Clawed right through the door. Won't make that mistake twice. The final entry, dated October 15th, 1956, was written in a shaky hand. They keep taking their shapes. Parker yesterday, looking almost right, but not quite, called me Stanley, but the voice was wrong, like it had too many tongues. I didn't answer. Remember, never answer. They can only take you fully if you answer. "What happened to him?" I asked, closing the journal. "Official record says he died in a fall," Caroline replied. "Unofficial truth? We don't know. His body was never found." Ethan, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "The thing that called your name tonight, it wasn't just passing by. It was hunting, and it picked you specifically." "But why me? I've only been here 3 weeks." Caroline and Dave exchanged looks. "That's what concerns us," Caroline said carefully. "They normally observe newcomers for months before engaging directly. But with you..." She trailed off. "With you, it's like they've been waiting." Dave finished for her. "Like they knew you were coming." A chill ran through me. "My dreams," I said quietly. "Before I even read the rules, I dreamed about something in the woods. A voice warned me not to look directly at them." Caroline leaned forward. "Tell me exactly what you saw in these dreams." I described the recurring nightmare. The overlook, the creature moving among the trees, the spectral hand on my shoulder with the warning about eyes forward after sunset. With each detail, Caroline's expression grew more troubled. When I finished, she stood and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner. After rifling through it, she returned with a photograph. "Is this the lookout from your dream?" I stared at the black and white image. The rocky outcropping, the view of the valley below, the distinctive twisted oak at the edge. It was identical to my dreamscape. "Yes, that's it exactly. This is Hawksbill Crag," she said. "It's not in our jurisdiction. It's over in Arkansas, about 100 miles from here." "I've never been there," I said, confused. "I believe you." Caroline sat again. "But Stanley Blackwood was stationed there before transferring to Tom Sauk, and the man who went missing the night before your arrival was there, photographing the sunrise." My mouth went dry. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Caroline replied, her voice steady, "that whatever's out there isn't just aware of you. It's connected to you somehow, and that makes you either very valuable or very dangerous to our operation here." Dave stood up, tucking his knife into his belt. "I say we escort him out tonight, get him reassigned somewhere urban, concrete and steel, far from any thin places." "No," Caroline said firmly. "If they want him, they'll follow. We've seen it before. Better he stays here, where we understand the protocols." She fixed me with a hard stare. "But from now on, you don't go anywhere alone, especially after dark. And you'll need this," Ethan said, reaching into his bag and pulling out a stone, larger than the others, marked with the 3/ symbol plus 2 additional curved lines. "Dave's been working on it since your first night here. Senior Ranger's intuition," he added with a nod to Caroline. I took the stone. Unlike the one that had appeared and disappeared in my cabin, this one felt permanent, the markings deep and deliberate. "Keep it with you at all times," Caroline instructed. "Sleep with it under your pillow. And we're moving you into the station dormitory. Your cabin's too isolated." "What about the rules?" I asked. "My copy vanished." "That's unusual," Caroline admitted. "I'll give you another set. Memorize them tonight, all of them, including the appendices." Dave cleared his throat. "There's one more thing he needs to know. The 9th rule." Caroline's head snapped up. "Dave, he needs to know," Dave insisted, "especially after tonight." Caroline sighed, then fixed her gaze on me. "Rule 9 isn't written down. It's passed verbally, ranger to ranger. If you're compromised, if one of them gets too close, gets inside your head, you use this." She pulled a small leather pouch from her pocket and set it on the table between us. I didn't reach for it. "What is it?" "Last resort," she said simply. "A mixture the Osage taught Blackwood. Toxic to humans. Fatal to whatever's wearing a human shape, but isn't one anymore." The implications hit me like a physical blow. "You're saying if I get taken over, I should end it," Dave said bluntly. "Before you hurt anyone else. Before you lure them in like you were lured into those woods tonight." I looked around at their solemn faces, the weight of what they were saying sinking in. This wasn't a prank or an initiation ritual. These people genuinely believed we were under siege by supernatural entities, and after what I'd seen on the trail, I was starting to believe it too. "The man who disappeared," I said finally. "What was his name?" "Robert Chambers," Caroline replied. "Wildlife photographer, worked for Missouri Conservationist magazine. He was documenting owls in the Ozark Highlands." The name meant nothing to me, brought no flash of recognition. Yet something tugged at the edges of my memory, a sensation more than a thought, like the fading remnants of a dream. "Get some rest," Caroline said, standing to indicate our meeting was over. Dawn patrol starts at 6 a.m. Dave will bunk with you tonight, just as a precaution." As we were leaving the main office, Caroline caught my arm. "One more thing, Ellis. The dreams, if you have another one, I want to know immediately. Every detail." "Why?" I asked. Her eyes met mine, dead serious. "Because in thin places, dreams aren't always just dreams. Sometimes they're messages or warnings." I nodded, clutching the warding stone in my palm until its edges bit into my skin. "Or invitations," Dave muttered as he brushed past us. "Don't forget that possibility." That night, despite my exhaustion, sleep came in fitful bursts. Each time I drifted off, I jerked awake, convinced I'd heard my name being called from just outside the window. By morning, my eyes were gritty and my nerves frayed, but at least I hadn't dreamed. I told myself that was a good sign. I was wrong. The alarm blared at 5:30 a.m., though I was already awake, staring at the ceiling of the station's sparse dormitory. Dave's bunk was empty, the sheets neatly made. I could smell coffee brewing down the hall. I dressed quickly, tucking my warding stone into my pocket and the leather pouch Caroline had given me into my inner jacket pocket. The weight of it pressed against my chest like a small, deadly secret. The main office was dimly lit when I entered. Dave sat cleaning a hunting rifle, his weathered hands moving with practiced efficiency. Caroline stood at the window, scanning the tree line through binoculars. "Morning," I mumbled, pouring myself coffee from the station's ancient percolator. "Sleep well?" Caroline asked, without lowering the binoculars. "Not particularly." "Good." She finally turned to face me. "Comfortable sleep in Taumsok is usually a bad sign. Means something's gotten close enough to influence your dreams." I took a scalding sip of coffee. "So no dreams is good?" "No dreams is unusual," she corrected, "but better than the alternative." Ethan burst through the door, unusually somber for his typically cheerful demeanor. "Perimeter check complete. Salt lines undisturbed, but..." He hesitated. "But what?" Dave prompted, not looking up from his rifle. "There's a circle of stones around the flagpole. Wasn't there last night?" Caroline swore under her breath. "Formation? Perfect circle, 13 stones, and they're all marked." Ethan pulled his phone from his pocket and showed her a photo. I peered over her shoulder. The stones were arranged with mathematical precision around the base of the flagpole, each bearing the same 3/ symbol that was on my warding stone, but with the lines carved deep enough to expose fresh, pale rock beneath the weathered surface. "It's a response," Caroline said quietly. "To what?" I asked. "To us protecting you." She pocketed Ethan's phone. "They're letting us know they can get this close anytime they want." Dave finally looked up, his eyes hard. "Marking our territory, like wolves pissing on fence posts." Caroline checked her watch. "Dawn patrol still needs to happen. Ellis, you're with me today. Ethan, you and Dave check the eastern trails and monitor the radio." She holstered her sidearm, a non-standard issue .357 Magnum rather than the typical service weapon. I noticed Dave had loaded his rifle with unusual ammunition. The brass casings looked normal, but the bullets had been dipped in something that left a white residue on the tips. "Salt and silver," he explained, catching my gaze. "Won't kill them, but hurts them enough to buy you running time." The knot in my stomach tightened. These people weren't just superstitious. They were prepared for war. 20 minutes later, Caroline and I were hiking along the western ridge of Taumsok Mountain. The sun had just cleared the horizon, bathing the autumn forest in golden light. Under different circumstances, it would have been beautiful. "The daytime rules are simpler," Caroline explained as we walked. "Things rarely approach in direct sunlight. but dawn and dusk are transition periods. They can be almost as dangerous as night. So why patrol at dawn at all? Because we need to check what changed overnight. She gestured to our surroundings. The trails shift sometimes, landmarks move, and we need to document any incidents. Like rock circles, among other things. She pointed to a massive oak ahead of us. See that tree? I nodded. It was ancient, its trunk wider than a car, with gnarled branches reaching skyward like arthritic fingers. That tree wasn't there yesterday. I stared at her, then back at the oak. It had to be hundreds of years old. That's impossible. Welcome to Tom Sock, she said grimly. Rule number 1 of day patrol: document changes, but don't interact with them. We'll mark it on the map and avoid it. As we continued, Caroline taught me how to identify other warning signs: bark stripped in specific patterns, animal tracks that change direction mid-step, plants growing in unnatural arrangements. Look for anything that feels wrong, she advised. Your instincts are your best tool here. The human brain recognizes patterns, even subconsciously. If something feels off, it probably is. We reached a small clearing where a circle of weathered stones surrounded the remains of an old campfire. Caroline tensed immediately. This isn't right, she murmured, unholstering her weapon. This area is off-limits to campers. I scanned the clearing. Nothing seemed obviously threatening. Just ordinary woods, morning bird song, dappled sunlight through the canopy. Yet something tugged at my awareness, a wrongness I couldn't immediately identify. Then it hit me. The shadows, I whispered. Caroline nodded, having noticed the same thing. The shadows in the clearing didn't match the position of the sun. While our own shadows stretched west, the shadows of the trees bent in various directions, some even seeming to reach toward us like grasping fingers. Back up slowly, Caroline instructed. Don't run. Don't turn your back. We retreated step by careful step. As we did, I noticed the shadows growing more distinct, darkening despite the brightening day. A twig snapped somewhere to our left. Don't look, Caroline hissed. But I couldn't help myself. My head turned reflexively toward the sound. Standing at the edge of the clearing was Robert Chambers, or what looked like him. I recognized him from news reports about his disappearance. Mid-40s, beard, flannel shirt under a photography vest. He looked perfectly normal, except for his complete stillness and the fact that he cast no shadow at all. Hello, Michael, he said, his mouth moving wrong like someone who'd only read about how lips should work. Remember me? Ellis, move. Caroline shoved me hard as she raised her magnum. The thing wearing Chambers' shape moved too, impossibly fast, covering 20 feet in a blur. Its form seemed to elongate as it lunged, limbs stretching, face distorting. Caroline fired twice, the shots deafeningly loud in the morning air. The creature jerked backward as the bullets hit, its chest blooming with white powder rather than blood. It made a sound, half scream, half laugh, and retreated into the trees. Run, Caroline ordered, grabbing my arm. Back to the trail now. We crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping our faces. Behind us, I could hear movement, not just from one direction, but from all around, as if the forest itself was giving chase. We burst onto the main trail, Caroline immediately pulling a small pouch from her pack and ripping it open. She scattered a line of white powder, salt, I realized, across the path behind us. It won't hold them long, she panted, but it'll slow them down. The radio at her hip crackled to life. Caroline, Ethan's voice broke through static. Are you there? We heard shots. She grabbed the radio. Encounter at Johnson's clearing. Hollow one with Chambers' face. Heading back to station. Need backup at Minasoc Junction. Copy that, Dave's voice replied. En route, 3 minutes. As we jogged along the trail, I finally found my voice. It knew me. It said, "Remember me." Caroline's expression was grim. "They're playing with you, trying to establish a connection. But why me? I don't know, but it's escalating faster than I've ever seen." She glanced at me. "And there's something else you should know. Johnson's clearing isn't on any of our maps. That area should have been a dense thicket. They created that space, positioned it in our path. They can do that? Normally, it would take them weeks to manipulate the landscape that significantly." The concern in her voice was evident. "They're putting a lot of energy into getting to you." We reached Minasoc Junction just as Dave's truck roared up the service road. He leaned out the window, rifle ready. "Get in." Ethan reported multiple rock circles forming around the station. Station's compromised. As we climbed into the truck, Dave fixed me with a hard stare. "We're going to Plan B, taking you to Ironton." "The town?" "Why?" Caroline answered, "There's someone there you need to meet." Someone who might understand what's happening. As Dave threw the truck into gear, I glanced back at the trail. For a moment, I thought I saw multiple figures standing among the trees, some tall and thin, others shaped like ordinary hikers or rangers, all completely motionless, all watching our departure. "Eyes forward," Caroline reminded me sharply. I turned away, clutching my warding stone. In my pocket, my hand brushed against something that hadn't been there before. A small, smooth stone, unmarked but warm to the touch. I didn't mention it to the others. Somehow, I knew this one was meant for me alone. A message, a warning, or perhaps, as Dave had suggested, an invitation. The drive to Ironton took 40 minutes on winding mountain roads. Dave drove with grim concentration, taking curves too fast and barely slowing for the occasional pothole. Caroline sat in the passenger seat, dividing her attention between the road ahead and the dense forest on either side. No one spoke. I clutched the unmarked stone in my pocket, its surface growing warmer the longer I held it. Something about it felt intimate, almost alive. Occasionally, I could swear it pulsed like a tiny heart. Ironton appeared suddenly, a small town nestled in a valley, its modest collection of buildings surrounded by the towering Ozark hills. The sign welcoming visitors claimed a population of 1,437, but the empty streets suggested a much smaller number. We pulled up in front of the Abbey Kitchen, the restaurant I'd visited during my first week. At 10 in the morning, the parking lot was nearly empty, except for a battered blue pickup and a sheriff's department cruiser. "We need to check in with Sheriff Downey first," Caroline explained as we exited the truck. "He monitors unusual activity in town. If the Hollow Ones followed us, he'll know." The restaurant's interior was dimly lit and smelled of cinnamon and coffee. Only 3 tables were occupied: an elderly couple by the window, a solitary man in a flannel shirt reading a newspaper, and Sheriff Downey himself, nursing a mug at the counter. Downey looked up as we entered, his weathered face creasing into a frown. He was in his 60s, with salt and pepper hair and the lean build of someone who'd spent a lifetime outdoors. He didn't seem surprised to see us. "Figured you'd be coming," he said by way of greeting. "Heard about Johnson's clearing." "Word travels fast," Caroline commented, sliding onto a stool beside him. "Not word, signs." Downey tapped his temple. "Migraine started about an hour ago. Always happens when they're active." He nodded toward me. "This the new ranger?" "Michael Ellis," Caroline confirmed. "He's of special interest to our friends in the woods." Downey's gaze shifted to me, assessing. "You look familiar, son." A strange response pulled from somewhere deep within me. I was here before, a long time ago. The words left my mouth before I could consider them. Caroline turned sharply, and Dave's hand moved toward his weapon. I don't know why I said that," I stammered. "I've never been to Ironton before 3 weeks ago." Downey studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You might not remember, but part of you knows." He stood, leaving money on the counter. "You're here to see Esther, I take it?" "If she's willing," Caroline replied. "She's expecting you." Downey grabbed his hat. "I'll drive ahead, make sure the route's clear." As the sheriff left, I turned to Caroline. "Who's Esther?" "Esther Blackwood," she answered. "Stanley Blackwood's daughter. She was 10 when he disappeared. Now she's the closest thing we have to an expert on the Hollow Ones." "She's in her 70s? 78? Dave confirmed. "And sharp as a tack. If anyone can figure out why they're fixated on you, it's Esther." We waited until Downey's cruiser pulled away, then followed in Dave's truck. Instead of heading into town, we turned onto a narrow gravel road that wound deeper into the surrounding hills. After about 15 minutes, the road ended at a small clearing where a cabin stood, smoke curling from its chimney. The cabin looked like something from another century, hand-hewn logs stained dark with age, a wide porch wrapped around 3 sides, windows glowing with warm light despite the morning sun. The surrounding yard was a riot of herb gardens, stone circles, and hanging bundles of dried plants. Sheriff Downey stood on the porch beside an elderly woman in a faded blue dress. Her white hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite her advanced age, she stood straight-backed and alert. As we approached, I noticed her eyes, a startling pale blue, almost translucent in the sunlight. Those eyes fixed on me immediately, widening in what looked like recognition. "Hello, Michael," she said, her voice stronger than her frail appearance suggested. "It's been a long time." A shiver ran through me. "Ma'am, I don't think we've met." "Not in this life, perhaps." She turned to Caroline. "Bring him inside. We don't have much time." The interior of the cabin was a single large room divided by hanging curtains and bookshelves. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, while the others were covered in maps, photographs, and handwritten notes, pinned in overlapping layers. The air smelled of wood smoke and herbs, with an underlying sweetness I couldn't identify. Esther gestured for me to sit at a round table near the fireplace. Its surface was inlaid with symbols similar to those on my warding stone, forming concentric circles around a central star. "Show me what they gave you," she said without preamble. I hesitated, then pulled the unmarked stone from my pocket. It was noticeably warmer now, almost hot to the touch. Esther didn't reach for it. Instead, she closed her eyes and passed her hand above it, not quite touching the surface. Fresh. Made this morning." Her eyes opened, fixing me with that unnerving pale stare. "You haven't told them about it." It wasn't a question, but I shook my head anyway. Good. It wasn't meant for them. She finally picked up the stone, turning it over in her gnarled fingers. "This is an invitation, not a threat. Unusual." Caroline stepped forward. "Esther, what's happening? Why are they so focused on him?" "They recognize him," Esther said simply. She set the stone down and reached for my hand. Her skin felt paper-thin and cool against mine. "May I?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure what I was agreeing to. Esther closed her eyes again, her thumb pressing against my wrist. For several minutes, she was completely still, barely seeming to breathe. Then, abruptly, she released me and sat back. "You've been dreaming of Devil's Backbone," she said. "Not just recently. All your life." The certainty in her voice unnerved me. "How did you—" "Because Stanley dreamed of it too." She gestured toward a framed photograph on the wall, a younger version of the man from Caroline's picture, standing proudly in a ranger uniform. My father was sensitive to the thin places. He could feel them calling, just like you. I'm not sensitive to anything, I protested. I'm just a park ranger who transferred here after an accident. Was it really an accident? Esther asked quietly. Or did something call you into danger? Something you couldn't quite see or understand? Images flashed through my mind. The ravine at Yellowstone, the strange lights I'd followed thinking they were lost hikers, the inexplicable compulsion to venture off the marked trail. Esther nodded, reading my expression. The Hollow Ones can reach beyond their territories, especially to those who are sensitive. They've been calling you for years, Michael. And now you've finally answered. But why me? Some people are born with thinner skins, she explained, more permeable to the other side. My father was one. I am too, though in a different way. She tapped the stone on the table. And clearly, you are as well. Dave, who had been silently monitoring the windows, spoke up. That doesn't explain why they're in such a damn hurry with him, creating clearings, leaving markers, approaching in daylight. They're breaking their own patterns. Because they're hungry, Esther said, and getting desperate. She rose and moved to one of the maps on the wall, a detailed topographical rendering of the Ozarks region, covered in handwritten notes and symbols in red and black ink. Various locations were circled, with dates written beside them. The Hollow Ones have existed here for thousands of years, she explained, but they've never been so active. In the past 20 years, disappearances have tripled. Encounters have increased tenfold. She tapped a section marked with a cluster of red circles, especially around Taum Sauk. Why? Caroline asked. The balance is shifting. The old methods of containing them are failing. Esther turned to face us. The indigenous peoples understood how to maintain the boundaries. Modern society has forgotten or ignored that knowledge. She returned to the table and picked up the stone. But this isn't just about hunger. This is something else. They want you specifically, Michael. Not just as food. A chill ran through me. What do they want me for? I think they want you as a bridge. Esther's pale eyes seemed to look through me, rather than at me. A way to cross over more permanently, to extend their hunting grounds. Like a door? Dave asked. More like a key, Esther corrected. Or a vessel. Sheriff Downey, who had been quietly standing by the door, suddenly stiffened. Something's coming. Esther moved to the window with surprising speed. They followed you, sooner than I expected. I joined her at the window. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just the clearing, Downey's cruiser, Dave's truck, the surrounding trees swaying gently in the breeze. Then I noticed the birds had stopped singing. They're testing my boundaries, Esther murmured, looking for weak spots. As if in response to her words, a figure emerged from the tree line, a woman in hiking gear, moving with an awkward, jerky gait. She stopped at the edge of the clearing and stood perfectly still, staring at the cabin. Who is that? I asked. Janet Keller, Downey answered grimly. Went missing on the Ozark Trail 2 months ago. Another figure joined the first, a man in a Park Service uniform, his movements equally unnatural. Then another and another, until 7 figures stood in a perfect line at the forest's edge. They've never been this bold, Caroline whispered, drawing her weapon. Never come this far from the thin places in daylight. They're evolving, Esther said. Learning. She turned to me. And they want you badly enough to risk it. The figures began to move in perfect unison, taking a single step forward, then stopping. Their mouths opened simultaneously, though from this distance I couldn't hear if they made any sound. Esther moved with sudden purpose, grabbing my arm and pulling me away from the window. "We don't have much time. You need to understand what you're dealing with." She led me to a trunk in the corner, unlocking it with a key she wore around her neck. Inside was a collection of journals similar to Stanley Blackwood's, stacked alongside artifacts wrapped in cloth: stones, carved wooden figures, bundles of herbs, and a silver box about the size of a paperback book. This last item she removed with reverence. My father made this the week before he disappeared. She opened the box to reveal a piece of yellowed paper covered in writing so dense it was nearly illegible, along with a small leather pouch similar to the one Caroline had given me. "His final understanding of what the Hollow Ones truly are," she explained. "Not spirits, not monsters in the conventional sense. They're more like absences, negations of reality, hungry voids that learn to mimic life." She handed me the paper. "Read it, quickly." The handwriting was cramped and frantic, but I could make out key passages. They aren't separate entities. They're extensions of a single consciousness, reaching through from somewhere else. They wear our dead like masks, because they have no form of their own. They feed not just on flesh, but on fear, memory, identity. What they take, they keep. What they learn, they all know. I've found their center, the place they're thinnest. Devil's backbone, where the rock itself seems to breathe. That's where I'll end this, one way or another." Esther took the paper back. "He went to Devil's Backbone that night. We never found his body, but 3 days later, someone with his face was seen walking the ridge. Not quite right. Not quite him." "They took him," I whispered. "No," Esther said firmly. "He made a choice. To understand them fully, to fight them on their own terms." She closed the box. "And now they want you to make the same choice." "Why would I ever choose that?" "Because part of you already has." Her gaze was penetrating. "The dreams, the stone you kept hidden, the words that come to you unbidden. The connection is forming, Michael, whether you want it or not." A sudden crash from outside interrupted us. Dave's voice called out, "They're moving! All at once!" Esther thrust the leather pouch from the silver box into my hands. "This isn't like Caroline's last resort. This is something else. My father's final discovery." "What does it do?" "It offers a third option, neither surrender nor death." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "When the moment comes, and it will, you'll know how to use it." Sheriff Downey burst through the door. "We need to move. Now they've surrounded the cabin." Through the windows, I could see the figures had multiplied. At least 20 now, forming a complete circle around the clearing. And they were slowly, inexorably, moving inward. "My wards won't hold them much longer," Esther said calmly. "Not all of them at once." "Where can we go?" Caroline demanded. "If they followed us here." "There's only one place," Esther replied, her eyes finding mine. "The same place my father went. Devil's Backbone." Dave swore. "That's suicide. It's their strongest point." "It's also where they're most vulnerable," Esther countered, "where they can be confronted directly." As they argued, I moved to the window again. The figures had stopped their advance, standing motionless about 20 yards from the cabin. As I watched, they all turned their heads in perfect unison, facing me directly. Then, as one, they raised their arms, pointing toward the southwest, toward Devil's Backbone. "They're showing me where to go," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Esther joined me at the window. "Yes," she said softly. "They're inviting you home." "We'll take the tunnels," Esther announced, moving toward what looked like an ordinary wood-burning stove in the corner of the cabin. She pulled a hidden lever, and the entire unit swung outward to reveal a narrow passageway descending into darkness. Prohibition-era smuggling route, she explained, grabbing a battery-powered lantern from a shelf. Runs about a quarter mile to an old hunting cabin on the other side of the ridge. They won't be expecting it. "What about your home?" Caroline asked. "Everything you've collected." "Is just paper and stone," Esther finished for her. "I've memorized what matters." She tapped her temple, then thrust a worn leather satchel into my hands. "Except these. Take my father's journals. You'll need them more than I will now." Sheriff Downey looked out the window. "They're still holding position, unnaturally still." He turned to Dave. "We'll need a diversion." Dave nodded grimly. "I've got some flashbangs in the truck. Military grade, bright enough to disorient them, maybe buy us a few minutes." "And I have something that might help," Esther added, pulling a small clay pot from beneath a floorboard. The contents looked like ordinary dirt, but gave off a pungent, metallic odor. Osage mixture. Confuses their senses. The plan came together quickly. Dave would create a diversion with the flashbangs, while Downey covered our escape. Caroline, Esther, and I would take the tunnel to the hunting cabin, then make our way to Devil's Backbone, about a 12-mile journey through dense forest. "Why can't we drive?" I asked. "Roads are too exposed," Caroline explained, "and they can manipulate the landscape. Trails are safer. They follow older patterns, have their own kind of memory." "What about Ethan?" I suddenly remembered our fourth ranger back at the station. "I radioed him while you were talking with Esther," Caroline said. "Told him to lock down and wait for instructions. He'll be safer there than with us." As Dave and Downey prepared for the diversion, Esther pulled me aside. "The journals will help you understand what you're facing," she said quietly. "But more importantly, they'll help you understand your role in all this." "And what exactly is my role?" I asked. "Bait? Sacrifice?" Her pale eyes held mine. "Mediator, perhaps, or executioner, maybe both." She pressed something into my palm, a smooth stone with a completed symbol, different from my warding stone. This one had 5 intersecting lines forming what looked like a star. "When you reach the backbone, you'll need this. It's the key to finishing what my father started." A sudden commotion outside interrupted us. The figures had begun to sway in unison, a macabre dance that seemed to distort the air around them. "They're preparing something," Esther warned. "We need to move now." Dave burst through the door, his face grim. "Charges are set, ready when you are." We gathered at the tunnel entrance. Downey checked his service weapon one last time, then nodded to Dave. "On my signal." Dave moved to the window, flashbang grenades ready. I took a last look around Esther's cabin, at the lifetime of research pinned to the walls, the carefully arranged protective symbols, the home she was about to abandon. 3, Downey counted. 2, 1, now. Dave hurled the first grenade through the window. A blinding flash erupted outside, followed by an ear-splitting bang. He immediately threw a second, then a third, creating a cascade of light and sound. Simultaneously, Esther flung her clay pot onto the porch. It shattered, releasing a cloud of reddish dust that the wind quickly carried toward the encircling figures. The effect was immediate and unsettling. The entities convulsed, their borrowed forms contorting in ways human bodies never should. Several dropped to all fours, moving with a terrible insectile scuttle. Others seemed to lose cohesion entirely, their outlines blurring like smoke in wind. "Go!" Downey shouted, firing several rounds into the nearest figure. It jerked backward, its chest blooming with white powder from the special ammunition. We descended into the tunnel, the stone walls close enough to brush my shoulders on both sides. Esther led the way, her lantern casting long shadows ahead of us. Caroline took the rear, weapon drawn, constantly glancing behind. The passage sloped downward for what felt like an eternity, the air growing cooler and damper. Water dripped from the ceiling, and our footsteps echoed hollowly. The weight of earth above us was a palpable presence, pressing down like a physical manifestation of dread. Behind us, the sounds of the diversion grew fainter, then silent. The only noise was our labored breathing and the occasional distant rumble, whether thunder or something else I couldn't tell. "Do you think they got away?" I asked Caroline after we'd been walking for several minutes. "Dave and Downey know what they're doing," she replied, though her tone lacked conviction. "They'll meet us at the rendezvous point." After what seemed like an hour, but was probably closer to 20 minutes, the tunnel began to slope upward. Finally, we reached a crude wooden ladder leading to a trapdoor. "Stay quiet," Esther warned as she climbed. "We don't know what's waiting." She pushed the trapdoor open a crack, then wider. After a moment, she climbed through, motioning for us to follow. We emerged into what had once been a hunting cabin, but was now little more than a shell. Roof partially collapsed, windows broken, floorboards rotted away in places. Through the gaps in the walls, I could see dense forest surrounding us, peaceful in the midday sun. "Seems clear," Caroline said, though she kept her weapon ready. Esther moved to a moss-covered window frame, peering out at the forest. "We need to keep moving. It's about 6 hours to Devil's Backbone if we maintain a good pace. We want to arrive at dusk." "Dusk?" I questioned. "Isn't that when they're most active?" "It's when the barrier is thinnest," she explained. "When communication is possible." "I don't want to communicate with them," I protested. "I want to get as far away from them as possible." Esther turned to me, her expression stern. "You've been communicating with them all your life, Michael. Those dreams? The compulsions that led you into danger? The words that come to you unbidden? That's them, reaching across the divide." She tapped the satchel containing her father's journals. "Read while we walk. Start with the red one. You need to understand what's happening before we reach the backbone." We set out through the forest, following what Esther claimed was an old hunting trail, though it was barely visible to my eyes. As we walked, I pulled out the red journal and began to read. The early entries echoed what I'd already seen in the excerpt Caroline had shown me. Observations about strange occurrences, disappeared colleagues, rules developed through trial and error. But the later entries took a different turn. October 3rd, 1956. "I'm beginning to understand them. They're not malevolent in the way we conceive it. They're hungry, empty, trying to fill themselves with what they lack: identity, emotion, physicality. They hunt because they need, not because they hate." October 7th, 1956. "The dreams are more frequent now. I see through their eyes sometimes, perceive the world as they do. It's maddening and beautiful. Colors don't exist for them, but they see rhythms, vibrations, the pulse of life itself." October 10th, 1956. "I know where their center is. Devil's Backbone. Not just a thin place, but a tear, a wound in reality that never healed properly. They're trapped here in a way, limited to these woods, these mountains, but they want to spread. They need a conduit, a bridge." The final entries became increasingly fragmented, the handwriting deteriorating. October 14th, 1956. "They're offering me understanding, complete knowledge. The price is high, but if I can learn enough, find their weakness." October 15th, 1956. "I've decided. Tonight I go to Devil's Backbone. Either I end this, or I become part of it. The mixture is prepared, the symbols drawn. God forgive me if I'm wrong." That was the last entry. I closed the journal, a cold weight settling in my stomach. He went there to stop them, I said to Esther, who was hiking steadily ahead of me. But it didn't work, did it? No, she replied without turning. Instead, he became what he was trying to destroy, or at least part of him did. What do you mean? She paused, waiting for me to catch up. The hollow ones that wear human faces, they don't just take bodies. They absorb memories, personalities, knowledge. When they took my father, they gained his understanding of them. And that changed them. Made them more dangerous, Caroline added from behind us. Made them more intentional, Esther corrected. Before, they were reactive, instinctual. After my father, they began to plan, to strategize. Her pale eyes fixed on me, to call to those who could hear them, like you. We continued through the increasingly rugged terrain. The forest grew denser, the underbrush thicker. Several times, Esther changed our course abruptly, claiming she felt wrong patterns ahead. Around mid-afternoon, we stopped at a small stream to rest and refill our water bottles. "We're being followed," Caroline said quietly, scanning the forest behind us. "I know," Esther replied. "Have been since we left the cabin." I looked around anxiously. "I don't see anything." "They're staying just out of sight," Esther explained, herding us, making sure we stay on the path to Devil's Backbone. "That doesn't sound like we're escaping," I pointed out. "Sounds like we're doing exactly what they want." "Sometimes," Esther said, "the only way out is through." The distant crack of a gunshot startled us all, then another and another. "Dave," Caroline said, straightening. "That's his rifle." 2 miles northwest, approximately. Esther calculated, tilting her head to listen. "Moving this way." We gathered our things quickly. Caroline tried the radio, but got only static, concerning in itself after what the rules had said about persistent static. The gunshots had stopped, but now other sounds reached us, breaking branches, movement through undergrowth coming fast. "Run!" Caroline commanded, drawing her weapon. We crashed through the forest, abandoning the subtle trail for speed. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Not just one follower, but many, moving with unnatural coordination through the dense woods. I clutched the satchel of journals to my chest as I ran, branches whipping my face, roots threatening to trip me with every step. The weight of Esther's marked stone thumped against my chest, where I tucked it into my shirt pocket. "There," Esther called, pointing ahead. Through the trees, I glimpsed a figure running toward us, Dave, his face bloodied, rifle clutched in white-knuckled hands. "They got Downey," he gasped as he reached us. "Surrounded the cabin after you left. Too many." He grabbed Caroline's shoulder to steady himself. "They're not just following anymore. They're converging, coming from all directions." "We're close to their center," Esther explained. "Their power is stronger here." "How much further to Devil's Backbone?" I asked. "About 3 miles," Esther replied. "But we won't make it on foot. Not all of us." Her pale eyes held mine for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pressed something into my hand. A compass, its needle spinning wildly instead of pointing north. "When it steadies, you'll be there," she said. "Go. Now we'll draw them off." "I'm not leaving you," I protested. Dave's hand clamped on my shoulder. "This isn't a democracy, Ellis. You're the one they want. We're making sure you get where you need to be." Before I could argue further, Caroline thrust a small pack into my hands. "Emergency supplies, my spare weapon, and this." She handed me a flare gun. "When you reach the backbone, fire 1 shot. We'll come if we can." The sounds of pursuit grew louder, crashing underbrush, snapping branches, and something else. Voices calling my name in a discordant chorus. "Go southeast," Esther instructed, pointing. "The compass will guide you the rest of the way." Her expression softened briefly, Finish what my father started, Michael, whatever that means. I wanted to protest further, but the determination in their faces stopped me. With a final nod, I turned and ran in the direction Esther had indicated, the satchel of journals bouncing against my hip, the compass clutched in my hand. Behind me, I heard Dave's rifle fire 3 times in rapid succession, then Caroline's magnum joining in. Esther's voice rose in what sounded like a chant or incantation, words in a language I didn't recognize. Then I was too far away to hear anything but my own labored breathing and the pounding of my heart as I raced toward Devil's Backbone and whatever waited for me there. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to buckle. The forest grew denser, older. The trees twisted into shapes that seemed to defy natural growth patterns. Twice I stumbled into clearings that hadn't been there seconds before, disorienting me completely. Only the compass kept me on track, its needle finally settling to point unerringly ahead. The fading daylight filtered through the canopy in weak, golden shafts. Dusk was approaching, the time when the barrier would be thinnest, according to Esther. The time when communication would be possible. The thought sent a shiver through me despite my exertion-heated skin. No sounds of pursuit reached me now. Either I'd outrun them, or they were moving more stealthily. Neither option was particularly comforting. As I paused to catch my breath against a massive oak, something white caught my eye, a piece of paper impaled on a nearby branch. I approached cautiously. It was a page from a journal, the handwriting immediately recognizable as Stanley Blackwood's. The key is understanding what they truly want. Not just sustenance, not just expansion. They want to be whole, to be real, to exist fully in our world rather than straddling the divide. The paper crumbled to dust when I touched it, as if it had been there for decades waiting for this moment. I looked around, suddenly aware of eyes on me. Not physical eyes, but a palpable sense of being observed from all directions. "I know you're there," I called out, immediately regretting breaking the silence. The forest answered with absolute stillness. No birds, no insects, not even the whisper of wind through leaves. Then, a voice behind me, familiar yet wrong, like someone playing a recording at slightly the wrong speed. "You came." I turned slowly. A man stood 10 feet away, tall, dressed in a park ranger uniform from a bygone era. His face was handsome in a weathered way, with intelligent eyes and a strong jaw. It took me a moment to recognize him from the photographs. Stanley Blackwood, or something wearing his shape. "You're not him," I said, my hand instinctively moving to the pouch Esther had given me. "Parts of me are," the thing replied, its mouth moving stiffly. "His memories, his knowledge, his understanding." It tilted its head, studying me. "Just as parts of you are already ours?" "What do you want from me?" I demanded, proud that my voice didn't shake. "To complete what he began." The Stanley thing gestured toward a barely visible trail. "The backbone is just ahead. She waits there." "She?" A smile that didn't reach its eyes. "The first, the oldest, the hungriest." Without waiting for a response, it turned and walked away, moving with that distinctive wrongness that characterized all the Hollow Ones, as if they understood the mechanics of human movement, but not the natural fluidity. I hesitated, then followed. What choice did I have? This was why I'd come. The trail wound upward through increasingly sparse vegetation. The trees here were stunted and twisted, their bark blackened as if by ancient fire. The ground beneath my feet changed from soil to stone, a ridge of exposed bedrock that rose like a spine from the surrounding forest. Devil's Backbone. It wasn't as tall as I'd expected, perhaps 100 feet at its highest point, but it emanated a presence that made it seem much larger. The rock itself seemed to pulse with faint energy, vibrating at a frequency just below conscious perception. As I climbed, the Stanley thing always remaining a few yards ahead, I became aware of movement all around the ridge. Figures emerging from the forest, climbing the slope, gathering in a loose circle. Some wore the faces of hikers and rangers I didn't recognize. Others were too distorted to pass as human at close range. Limbs too long, joints bending in impossible directions, features sliding across their faces like melting wax. The compass in my hand spun wildly again, then shattered, glass shards cutting my palm. I barely felt it. All my attention was focused on what waited at the summit. There, on the highest point of the ridge, stood a solitary figure, silhouetted against the deepening twilight sky. As I approached, details became clear. A woman in pioneer-era clothing, her dress torn and dirty, her hair wild around a face of terrible beauty. She didn't move as I approached, didn't breathe. But her eyes tracked me, ancient and hungry and aware. "Mina," I said, the name coming unbidden to my lips. The woman's head tilted, an unnatural angle that made my stomach lurch. "They called me that once," she replied, her voice like dry leaves rustling. "The first to fall, the first to change, the first to hunger." I glanced back. The Stanley thing had stopped several yards away. Beyond it, the other entities formed a complete circle around the summit, motionless and silent, watching. "Why me?" I asked, turning back to her. "Why call me here?" "Because you can hear us." Her form flickered, momentarily revealing something else beneath the woman shape. Something without definite form, a darkness deeper than mere absence of light. "Because you are like him." She gestured toward the Stanley thing. "Permeable, a door that can open both ways." I reached into my pocket, fingers closing around Esther's marked stone. "Blackwood came to stop you." A sound escaped her. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. "He came to understand us, and in understanding became part of us." "That's not going to happen to me," I stated firmly, though fear coursed through me. "It already has begun," she countered. "The dreams, the knowledge that isn't yours, the words that come to you unbidden." She extended a hand toward me, fingers too long, nails like talons. "We have been preparing you all your life, Michael Ellis." I stepped back, nearly stumbling on the uneven rock. Preparing me for what? To be our voice, our eyes, our gateway. Her form flickered again, the human shape struggling to contain whatever existed beneath it. "Since the old protections failed, we have been trapped here, confined to these woods, these mountains. But you could change that." Realization dawned, cold and terrible. "You want to spread, to hunt beyond the Ozarks." "We want to be whole," she corrected, echoing the words from Blackwood's journal page. "To exist fully in your world." "By consuming it," I added. "By consuming us." She didn't deny it. Instead, she took a step toward me, her movements so fluid it seemed like she floated above the rock. "Join with us willingly, and the hunger can be controlled, directed. Your friends would be spared." Images flashed in my mind. Caroline, Dave, Ethan, even Esther, safe under my protection while the hollow ones fed elsewhere. A bargain. A compromise. I knew then what had happened to Stanley Blackwood. He'd come here intending to end the threat, but found himself unable to resist the offer. Protection for those he cared about in exchange for becoming their conduit. He'd said yes, becoming neither fully human nor fully hollow, but something in between. A mediator, as Esther had suggested. Or perhaps a jailer who'd slowly become corrupted by his prisoners. My hand moved to the satchel at my hip, where the other journals waited unread. Had he left clues there? A way to truly end this? "What's your answer, Michael?" the mean thing asked, now close enough that I could feel a cold emptiness radiating from her, like standing before an open freezer. I reached into my pocket and pulled out Esther's stone, holding it before me like a shield. The 5-pointed star symbol seemed to glow faintly in the gathering darkness. "This is my answer," I said, though I had no idea what the stone was meant to do. Her expression changed, fear, perhaps, or anger. The Stanley thing stepped forward suddenly. "Not that. He doesn't understand what he's doing." The Mina thing raised a hand, and the Stanley thing froze mid-step. "He's made his choice," she hissed, her voice distorting, multiplying as if many voices spoke at once. I felt a sudden pressure in my head, like a migraine exploding behind my eyes. Instinctively, I pressed the stone to my forehead where the pain was strongest. The world seemed to split apart. Suddenly, I could see them as they truly were. Not people, not even cohesive entities, but tears in reality. Absences given animation by desperate hunger. They pulsed and writhed around me, reaching with appendages that weren't arms, sensing with organs that weren't eyes. And I could see the ridge for what it truly was. Not just a rock formation, but a wound in the world. A place where the membrane between realities had worn paper thin, allowing these things to slip through. The stone in my hand burned cold, the symbol now definitely glowing with pale blue light. Knowledge flooded me. Not my own, but Blackwood's, preserved somehow in the stone Esther had carried all these years. I understood what I needed to do. I knelt and placed the stone directly on the rock beneath me, pressing it firmly into a natural depression that seemed made for it. The symbol flared brighter, spreading outward in lines of blue fire that traced the natural seams in the bedrock. The entities reacted immediately, surging toward me with inhuman shrieks. But they couldn't approach. The spreading light formed a barrier they couldn't cross. The Mina thing convulsed, her human form tearing apart to reveal the nothingness within. "What have you done?" The words weren't spoken, but felt, vibrating through my skull. "What Blackwood intended to do," I answered, understanding flowing through me. "He didn't come to stop you or join you. He came to contain you, to strengthen the boundary, not destroy it." The blue light had spread across the entire summit now, forming a complex pattern of interlocking symbols, like the stone circles and warding marks, but on a massive scale. I pulled the pouch Esther had given me from my pocket, finally comprehending its purpose. Not a poison as Caroline's had been, but a sealing agent. I opened it and spread the contents, a mixture of earth, herbs, and what looked like ground stone, in a circle around me. "You can't erase us," the Mina thing raged, its form now completely inhuman, a writhing darkness with too many limbs. "We are eternal. We are hunger itself." "I'm not trying to erase you," I said, continuing the ritual as knowledge flowed through me. "Just sending you back where you belong." I completed the circle and stood in its center. The final step required blood, willing sacrifice to power the seal. I drew Caroline's knife from my pack and, without hesitation, sliced my palm, letting the blood drip onto the glowing symbol beneath me. The light surged, blinding in its intensity. The entities screamed, a sound beyond sound, a vibration that threatened to shake me apart at the molecular level. I felt something tear inside me, a connection I hadn't even been aware of severing brutally. Pain lanced through my mind, memories that weren't mine burning away. The last thing I saw before consciousness fled was the hollow ones being pulled downward, dragged back through the thin place, their borrowed forms dissolving as they were forced back to their own reality. Then darkness took me, and I fell into a deep, dreamless void. I woke in Ironton General Hospital 3 days later. Caroline sat beside my bed, her face showing the strain of sleepless nights. When she noticed my eyes open, relief washed over her features. "Welcome back," she said simply. My throat felt like sandpaper. "The others?" "Dave's down the hall. Concussion, 3 broken ribs, but he'll recover." She poured a cup of water and helped me drink. "Ethan's fine, never left the station. And Esther." A pause. "Esther didn't make it." The news hit like a physical blow. "How?" "She bought us time," Caroline said softly. "Used herself as bait to draw them away from Dave and me so we could reach you at the backbone." Her eyes lowered. "By the time we got there, you were unconscious and the ridge was different." "Different how?" "Quiet, still." She searched my face. "Whatever you did up there changed things. The thin place is still thin, but sealed somehow. We've been monitoring it for 3 days. No activity, no sightings, nothing." I tried to sit up, wincing at the pain that shot through my head. "They're not gone. Just contained. Sent back where they belong." Caroline nodded. "That's what Esther predicted might happen." Before she trailed off, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small stone. Unmarked, ordinary. "We found this clutched in your hand. The pattern you created with your blood. It's permanently part of the rock up there now. A seal." Memories flickered through my mind, fragmented images of the ritual, knowledge that had flowed into me from Blackwood's preserved consciousness, the terrible true form of the Hollow Ones. "I can't remember all of it," I admitted. "It's like trying to recall a dream." "Maybe that's for the best," Caroline suggested. "Sheriff Downey's replacement arrived yesterday. Young guy from Springfield, full of questions about what happened. Official report says a gas leak at Esther's cabin, wildlife attack for our injuries." I laughed hollowly, then regretted it as pain stabbed through my ribs. Will he believe that? Doesn't matter. The rules will protect him, just like they've protected rangers for decades. She stood, adjusting her uniform. "Speaking of which, your transfer paperwork came through. Yellowstone's agreed to take you back once you're cleared medically. And if I don't want to go back." The question surprised me as much as her. Caroline studied me for a long moment. "The seal won't hold forever, Ellis. Decades, maybe, but not forever. Someone needs to monitor it. Someone who understands." "Someone like me," I finished. She nodded. "Think about it. The offer stands either way." After she left, I stood carefully and moved to the window. From here, I could just make out the dark line of the Ozark Mountains against the horizon. Devil's Backbone was out there, sealed but not permanently, waiting. I reached for the connection I'd felt with the Hollow Ones, the dreams and unbidden knowledge. Nothing came. That link had been severed during the ritual. But in its place was something else. A sense of responsibility. A duty to the barrier I'd helped strengthen. 3 weeks later, I moved my few possessions into a new cabin at Tomsock Station. The journal I've been keeping, this record you're reading, sits on my desk beside Blackwood's originals, a continuation of his work. The rules are still posted on every ranger's bulletin board. We still follow them religiously. But there's a new rule now, one I added myself. Rule 10, visit Devil's Backbone on the equinox at dawn. Renew the seal with 3 drops of blood freely given. Remember why we stand guard. The night terrors have stopped. No more dreams of creatures moving through the trees. But sometimes, when I patrol near the ridge, I feel them waiting on the other side of reality. Patient, hungry, eternal. And I know that as long as I'm here, they'll stay there, in the thin place, where they belong.